All right, let's now bring in Dr. Keitumetse Mashego, clinical and sports psychologist, who joins us now via video link to look at the psychological impact of these incidents. Thank you so much, Dr. Mashego, for your time. Let's look at then, the first case in as far as the drowning is concerned. I mean, this is the second drowning, as we've heard in that report, this year alone. What are the psychological effects in this particular case, particularly in as far as the children who may have witnessed the drownings and those who probably felt completely helpless?
Good afternoon, and good afternoon to the listeners. It's very sad when such a tragedy happens. I mean, already as adults, we struggle to grapple with death. There's always the feelings, the emotions, the high intense emotions, and now in such a traumatic manner for children to witness the death and also, the feelings that might come afterwards, it can have severe impact. The children are at risk to experience a lot of psychological distress, anxiety, persistent thoughts of death. There's a lot of grieving that will also happen because they knew the learners, they were schoolmates with them. So there's also that risk of that happening where they are just stuck with these intense emotions. And it's really quite a tragedy, and they will need a lot of psychological assistance to overcome, but also so that, to prevent them to develop a pathology that cannot be helped in the future.
And then, of course, there is that trauma, of the parents. Many a time you send your children to these excursions. One of the least things you expect is, for your child to at least be, surrounded by caring guardians. What could they be going through? And I mean, how do they start, processing what happened?
It's very sad what you say, as you're saying that, you take your child to school, you don't expect the worst case scenario to happen to them, or take them to an excursion where you believe there will be caretakers and there are none, or, you find that a learner has passed on and this happens to be your child. I mean, there could be a lot of denial, just a lot of what ifs, a lot of regret, a lot of pain, because, losing a child is very difficult for any parent, and there is no excuse for what happened to these children, and it's very sad for the parents. It will be very difficult. It will be lifelong, because with grief, it forces you to really sit down with yourself and the pain, and we grieve for the people we loved. So what more for a child that you've lost in such a tragic manner? So there's a lot of things that must go into play, and they need assistance, as parental figures, to process what happened, to navigate the loss, and to actually start living without the children that they thought they would be taken care of when they get older. So there is also that need to now process the reality, the new reality that they never expected.
I would imagine what exacerbates, post-traumatic stress disorder or any of those, stresses following such incidences is the fact that you don't know exactly what happened. The details are not clear. I mean, many a times during these incidents, you see these investigations happening, but the details are still not clear. What do you do in those instances where you really want answers?
It's difficult when you don't get the answers, but also the parents hearing the stories from the surviving learners, surviving pupils. So just hearing how their child, was actually, lost their life, that can also be what we call vicarious trauma or secondary traumatization, where you're hearing the story and you actually start reliving a story based on what is being told. So the mind is so powerful that it can actually create, images just from you hearing the story being told about how your child passed on. So it can be, a complicated grief in that now you don't have answers, but also you also struggling with these images, intrusive images and thoughts about how your child passed away. But also even for the people who are not there, that are hearing the story, that they can also start worrying about their own children, who also witnessed this. So the parents, for the other learners who survived, they can also struggle now with a lot of anxiety, just thinking about, what if their child is next in suffering such a tragedy.
Now, with all these anomalies, just talk to us, how, parents and even pupils can then, begin to get therapy. What are they likely then, or what is the best therapy that they need at this moment, given the fact that there are, so many moving parts and so many questions that are left unanswered?
I think first is to, there will be a lot of trauma within the children themselves, but also, the caregivers for the children in whatever form, shape, or size that, they are cared for. So there would need to be debriefing for this crisis, so sort of crisis intervention, to help them process what has happened, but to also have a safe space to really express the intense emotions because there will be a lot of emotions, whatever those emotions are, because people respond to grief differently, to trauma differently. So whatever it is that they're struggling with, that needs to be processed, but also, them as a group, but as individuals. And, with trauma or grief happening to someone, it might trigger past traumas. So then if there's a need for intense individual therapy because this type of trauma has triggered past experiences of trauma, or it has triggered other memories of life experiences, then obviously then people would need more individual therapy to help them process everything that they have been through in the past that has been triggered by this current situation.